Abandoned at the altar, she never imagined a stranger's comfort would change her life forever. Watch until the end to discover if it's too late to mend broken hearts, or if this reunion will transform everything. And tell me, would you forgive him? The unseen hand. A love forged in heartbreak, Eleanor Green gazed at her reflection in the mirror, with a mix of nerves and pure joy. The shimmering white lace of her gown softly brushed the floor as she made the final adjustments. Her mother, standing beside her, took her hand and whispered excitedly, "You look beautiful, darling. Today will be the best day of your life." Eleanor smiled, though her heart pounded. She had dreamed of this moment for months, walking down the aisle to see Thomas Miller, the man she deeply loved, waiting for her. His eyes filled with emotion. The venue was adorned with white and lilac flowers, and a faint scent of jasmine drifted through the air. The guests, all smiling, exchanged murmurs of admiration. Eleanor knew this was the beginning of her eternal happiness. However, just as she was about to leave for the ceremony, an uncomfortable silence filled the vestibule. Her bridesmaid's voice, visibly pale, broke the moment. "Eleanor, you need to read this." In her trembling hands, she held an envelope. Eleanor took it, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She slowly opened the paper, as if with each movement she tried to delay the inevitable. The words written were clear and devastating. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. Forgive me." The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. The air, which moments ago was filled with promises and love, now weighed like a slab on her chest. Her mother tried to hold her, but Eleanor pulled away, unable to contain her tears. The voices around her faded, replaced by a deafening hum. She couldn't understand how Thomas, the man with whom she had built so many dreams, could simply abandon her. In the midst of the chaos, an unknown man approached with unexpected calm. He wore an elegant dark gray suit, and his brown eyes radiated a mix of empathy and determination. "Eleanor, isn't it?" he asked softly. She, her eyes filled with tears, could barely nod. "I'm Daniel Knight. I know this isn't the time or place, but can I help you? No one should go through this alone." Eleanor looked at him, disconcerted by the kindness of a stranger. Although she hesitated at first, something in his tone made her feel a little less exposed, less broken. "I don't want to be here," she finally murmured. Daniel nodded and extended a hand. "Then let's go. You don't have to face this right now." Carefully, Daniel led her out of the hall, dodging curious glances and the murmurs of the guests. The cold evening air hit her face when they stepped outside, and Eleanor felt she could breathe, though barely. Daniel took her to a small nearby cafe, where they sat at a secluded table. The silence between them was comfortable, almost necessary. After a while, Daniel spoke. "I know everything seems impossible to overcome right now. But believe me, with time, things settle down. I know because I was also abandoned once." His words, spoken with painful sincerity, surprised Eleanor. For the first time in hours, she looked up to meet his eyes. There was something in them, an echo of her own sadness, but also a promise that life went on. Eleanor didn't know why, but she began to speak. She told him how she had met Thomas, how they had planned every detail of their wedding, how he had been her everything. Daniel listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, allowing her to release the weight she carried. "Sometimes," he finally said, "people aren't meant to fulfill the expectations we place on them. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve more." The words resonated with Eleanor in an unexpected way. Although her heart was still shattered, Daniel's presence offered her a strange comfort, as if, for the first time that day, she wasn't completely alone. Night fell, and Daniel insisted on accompanying her home. Before saying goodbye, he made a promise that sounded strangely firm for a man she had just met. This doesn't define who you are, Eleanor. And don't worry, you'll get through this. I'll help you." Eleanor watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the darkness. She didn't understand why, but inside her, there was something more than pain. A tiny spark of hope began to ignite, though she couldn't yet identify it. As he walked away, Daniel clenched his fists. There was something else he hadn't told Eleanor, something that connected him to that wedding and that particular day. However, he decided to keep his secret, at least for now. What a devastating start to a story. How would you react if your dream wedding turned into your worst nightmare? Share your raw emotions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the shocking twists ahead. The days following Eleanor's abandonment at the altar were a mix of pain and lethargy. Although she tried to maintain her composure, the questions and comments from those around her haunted her. In her mind, the words of Thomas's note repeated over and over, like an endless echo. Daniel, true to his word, stayed close. Despite being practically a stranger, his constant presence had become a kind of refuge for Eleanor. He helped her with small gestures, doing the shopping, fixing a broken lamp in her flat, or simply listening when she felt the weight of the situation was unbearable. However, something strange began to happen. Eleanor, who had always enjoyed good health, started experiencing dizziness and morning sickness. At first, she thought it was accumulated stress, but days passed and the symptoms intensified. A persistent malaise forced her to consider that perhaps it was something more. One afternoon, after briefly fainting while walking in the park with Daniel, he insisted she see a doctor. Eleanor reluctantly agreed, not imagining that this visit would change everything. At the clinic, as the doctor reviewed the test results, Eleanor felt her heart pound fiercely. The doctor looked at her with a slight smile and said, "Congratulations, Eleanor. You're pregnant." The words seemed to stop time. Eleanor blinked several times, trying to process what she had just heard. "Pregnant," she repeated, as if saying it aloud could confirm it was real. On the way home, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The memory of Thomas invaded her thoughts, and the pain of his abandonment mixed with confusion and fear. When she arrived at her flat, Daniel was waiting for her. He immediately noticed something wasn't right. "What happened? What did the doctor say?" he asked with genuine concern. Eleanor, still in shock, sank onto the sofa. "I'm pregnant, Daniel," she finally said, her voice trembling. Daniel remained silent for a moment, as if processing the news. Then he sat beside her. That changes a lot of things," he finally said, his tone warm and calm. Eleanor looked at him, searching for any sign of judgment on his face, but found only understanding. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know how to handle this alone." Daniel took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You're not alone, Eleanor. No matter what happens, I'll be here for you. I promised, remember." His words, though simple, brought unexpected comfort. Eleanor nodded, but couldn't help feeling afraid. What if Thomas found out? How would he react? In the days that followed, Daniel continued to support her. He accompanied Eleanor to medical appointments and helped her prepare her flat for the baby, even though she still hadn't fully processed what it meant to be a mother. Meanwhile, Eleanor couldn't help but notice something about Daniel, something she hadn't seen before. Despite his always calm demeanor and willingness to help, there were moments when he seemed distant, as if he was struggling with something he couldn't share. One evening, while they were having dinner together in her small kitchen, Eleanor decided to confront him. "Daniel, you've been incredible with me, but I feel like there's something you're not telling me. What's going on?" Daniel looked at her, surprised by her direct question. For a moment, He seemed torn between telling the truth or remaining silent. Finally, he took a deep breath. "It's not easy for me to be here, Eleanor. Seeing what you're going through reminds me of my own story. My fiancée also left me, but I never had the chance to fight for her. I lost someone I loved, and I think that's why I feel I need to be here for you, to make sure you don't go through the same thing." His words touched something deep in Eleanor. Although she was still grappling with her own pain, she began to understand that Daniel also carried his own scars. Their connection, which had begun as simple help, now seemed something more significant, something neither of them was ready to name. That night, after Daniel left, Eleanor stayed awake, thinking about everything that had happened. The weight of her pregnancy news was still there, but somehow Daniel's presence made the burden a little lighter. However, deep down, she couldn't help but wonder what Thomas would think if he discovered the truth. As Eleanor wrestled with her thoughts, an unexpected call interrupted her peace. Answering, she heard a voice she didn't expect to hear again. "Eleanor, it's Thomas. We need to talk." Just when she thought she was finding peace, Thomas returns. What do you think he wants? How would you handle this sudden reappearance? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next shocking turn. Eleanor slowly lowered the phone, her hand trembling as her mind tried to process what she had just heard. Thomas's voice still echoed in her ears. "We need to talk." It was an echo of something she thought she would never have to face again. A ghost she had managed to keep at bay for weeks thanks to Daniel's constant presence. But now, the emotions she thought were controlled began to stir like a storm. That night, Eleanor could barely sleep. Thomas's words, though brief, carried a weight she found impossible to ignore. There was something in his tone, a mix of regret and desperation, that deeply unsettled her. But along with that unease also came rage. By what right did he return now, after leaving her humiliated in front of everyone, alone and vulnerable? The next morning, Thomas arrived at her door. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, as if trying to project an image of control that contrasted with the vulnerability in his eyes. Eleanor let him in, but kept her arms crossed and her gaze firm, determined not to be swept away by the torrent of emotions his presence evoked. "Eleanor, I'm sorry," he began, his voice breaking. "I know I have no excuse for what I did, but I was scared. The engagement, the marriage, it all overwhelmed me. I didn't want to fail you, so I ran." She let out a bitter laugh. "That's it. You ran because you were scared, and you didn't think about what it would do to me, how you humiliated me in front of everyone." Thomas lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I know I hurt you, and I regret it every day since. Eleanor, please, give me another chance. I want to fix things. I want to be with you all." The weight of those last words fell on her like a blow. "With you all," she repeated, incredulity in her voice. Thomas nodded, taking a step towards her. "I know you're pregnant. I don't know how I found out, but I do. And I can't let you face this alone. I want to be the father our child deserves. I want to be the man you deserve." Eleanor felt a whirlwind of emotions. The part of her that had once loved Thomas wanted to believe his words, wanted to let everything go back to how it was. But another part, a stronger, more confident part, couldn't ignore the pain he had caused her. "Thomas, you can't just show up here and expect everything to be as it was," she finally said, her voice full of determination. "I'm having this baby, but I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can forget what you did." At that moment, Daniel entered the flat, carrying a bag of groceries. He stopped when he saw Thomas, and although his expression remained neutral, Eleanor noticed a flicker of tension in his eyes. "Am I interrupting something?" Daniel asked. Looking at Eleanor, "No, Daniel, it's fine," she replied quickly. Thomas and I were talking. Daniel nodded, but didn't move, as if his presence could protect her from anything that might happen. Eleanor couldn't help but feel a strange comfort having him there, but she also perceived the discomfort in the air. Thomas looked at Daniel with a mix of curiosity and distrust. "And who are you?" he asked, his tone barely concealing his displeasure. "I'm a friend," Daniel replied calmly, but his direct gaze seemed to challenge Thomas. The tension between the two men was palpable, and Eleanor felt the need to intervene before the situation escalated. "Daniel, thank you for bringing the groceries. We'll talk later, okay?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and left the flat. However, before leaving, he cast a final look at Thomas, a look that seemed to say, "Don't you dare hurt her again." When the door closed, Thomas turned his attention back to Eleanor. "Who is he?" he asked, with a tone that couldn't hide his jealousy. "He's just a friend," she replied, although the words sounded strange even to herself. Because Daniel wasn't just a friend. He was her support, her refuge, the person who had been there when she needed him most. "I hope so," Thomas said, but his expression clearly showed he wasn't convinced. Eleanor decided not to engage in that debate. She had more important things to think about, like what to do with Thomas's plea. Although a part of her wanted to believe in his repentance, another part knew that trusting him again was a huge risk. Not only for her, but also for the baby on the way. That night, after Thomas left, Eleanor was left alone with her thoughts. She looked at the bag of groceries Daniel had brought and wondered why his presence was so important to her. Thinking about him filled her with a calm that Thomas had never been able to offer, but it also terrified her. Because admitting what she truly felt for Daniel would mean facing a whole new world, a world she wasn't yet sure she was ready to accept. From the window, Eleanor saw Daniel walking down the street, hands in his pockets and his gaze lost. It could be that he too was grappling with something he dared not say. A love triangle emerges. What do you think Eleanor's true feelings are for Daniel? Should she give Thomas another chance? Share your advice in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the emotional twists to come. The relationship between Eleanor and Daniel had become an anchor point in recent months. His presence was constant, warm and comforting, as if he were the only stable piece in the chaos of her life. Daniel had taken on a role that went beyond simple friendship. He was there for every doctor's appointment, carried the shopping bags, helped her assemble the baby's nursery furniture, and even cooked for her on days when exhaustion became unbearable. He was such unwavering support that Eleanor couldn't help but wonder how she had been so lucky to find him. But emotions, as always, are complicated. One Saturday afternoon, while Eleanor and Daniel were organizing a small wardrobe they had assembled together, his phone rang. Daniel checked it, and seeing the name on the screen, smiled. "It's Sophia," he said, getting up quickly. "I haven't spoken to her in a while. It'll be quick." Eleanor felt an unexpected pang in her chest. She didn't understand why that name resonated so strongly in her mind. Sophia, a woman Daniel had mentioned only once, casually, as his ex-girlfriend. Eleanor tried to ignore it and continued folding small baby blankets, but her ears couldn't help but catch fragments of Daniel's conversation from the hallway. "Yes, of course, we can catch up this week. It'll be good to see you," Daniel said, with a light laugh that Eleanor didn't remember hearing before. When Daniel returned to the room, she pretended to be focused on the task, but her mind was full of questions she didn't dare to ask. "Everything all right?" he asked, oblivious to Eleanor's internal turmoil. "Yes, of course," she replied quickly, smiling in a way she hoped looked natural. But it wasn't. Days later, Daniel mentioned he was meeting Sophia for coffee. He said it with the casual tone of someone sharing an unimportant detail. But Eleanor felt her heart race. Why did it bother her so much? Why did that discomfort follow her every time she thought of them together? The answer came unexpectedly. A few weeks later, while Eleanor was walking through a nearby park to clear her mind, she saw Daniel sitting at an outdoor table with Sophia. From afar, the scene looked like something out of a romantic movie. Sophia was beautiful, with her perfectly styled hair and an infectious laugh that lit up Daniel's face. Eleanor stopped, unable to move forward or backward. Something inside her broke in that moment, a mixture of jealousy, confusion, and pain. She didn't understand why she felt a lump in her throat, seeing them together. Daniel owed her nothing, and her relationship with him had always been platonic. But there she was, standing in the shade of a tree, unable to look away, wondering if Sophia might reclaim a place that perhaps she never stopped occupying in Daniel's heart. That night, Daniel stopped by her flat as usual, bringing a bag of groceries and a carefree smile. Eleanor tried to act normal, but something in her tone was different, colder, more distant. Daniel noticed immediately. "Are you okay, Ellie?" he asked, using the affectionate nickname he had adopted for her. "Yes, just tired," she replied, not looking at him directly. Daniel frowned but didn't press. However, as they ate dinner, Eleanor couldn't help but let a question escape her lips. "How was your coffee with Sophia?" Daniel, surprised by the comment, put his utensils down on his plate. "It was good. We were just catching up. Why do you ask?" Eleanor shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "Curiosity, I suppose." "Are you sure everything's okay?" Daniel insisted, leaning slightly towards her, with that gaze that always seemed to see beyond what Eleanor wanted to show. She opened her mouth to reply, but couldn't find the words. What could she say? That she felt jealous of something she had no right to claim? That every time she saw him with Sophia, a part of her wanted to scream at him not to leave? Instead, she said the only thing that could come out of her mouth without revealing too much. "Just don't forget I'm here, okay?" Daniel smiled, but there was something in his gaze, a shadow of something he wasn't saying. "Ellie, I could never forget you," he replied sincerely. That night, after Daniel left, Eleanor sat on the bed, gently stroking her belly as tears fell down her face. She was so confused. Why did she feel this for Daniel? Was it gratitude, dependence, or something more? The baby gave a small kick, pulling her from her thoughts. Eleanor looked down and smiled, but the question remained. What would she do if these feelings grew beyond her control? Daniel, walking towards his flat, stopped in the middle of the street. He looked back towards Eleanor's building, an expression of conflict on his face. Could it be that he too was struggling with something he couldn't admit? A painful realization. What do you think Daniel's true feelings are for Eleanor? And what secret is he holding on to? Should Eleanor confess her feelings? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next emotional turning point. The night was quiet, but the air in Daniel's flat felt heavy, laden with something he hadn't had the courage to share until now. Eleanor was sitting on the sofa, legs crossed, a cup of tea in her hands, while Daniel moved nervously around the room, as if searching for the right words. "Ellie, I need to talk to you about something important," he finally said, stopping in front of her. Eleanor looked up, alarmed by the seriousness in his voice. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" Daniel took a deep breath and sat in the chair opposite her, resting his elbows on his knees and lacing his hands together. "I received a job offer," he began, his tone measured, as if he feared how she might react. "It's abroad, at a company I've always dreamed of working for. It's an incredible opportunity, and I think I should take it." The words fell like a slab on Eleanor. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Her heart stopped, and then began to pound, as if trying to compensate for the impact. Daniel wasn't just talking about a job. He was talking about leaving, about abandoning her. "When were you told?" she asked softly, trying to stay calm as the weight of the news settled in her chest. "A few days ago," Daniel admitted, looking down. "I wasn't sure how to tell you, but now it's official. I signed the contract this morning." Eleanor felt her throat close. There was something in her chest that threatened to break, but she forced herself to smile, though her eyes betrayed her true emotion. "Well, it sounds like a great opportunity," she said, her voice breaking slightly at the end. Daniel looked up at her, studying her as if trying to decipher what she was really thinking. "Ellie, I don't want to leave you alone. I know the baby's almost here, and—" "You don't have to worry about me," she interrupted him quickly, getting up from the sofa and placing the cup on the table. "Thomas is trying to be a part of this, and I'll be fine. Besides, you deserve this opportunity, Daniel." Her words seemed to come from an automatic place, as if she were trying to convince herself as much as him. Daniel observed her with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something he dared not name. "Thank you for understanding," he finally said, but his tone wasn't triumphant. It was cautious, as if he feared things weren't as well as they seemed. In the days that followed, Eleanor tried to stick to her routine, but Daniel's constant presence in her thoughts made everything more difficult. The idea that he would leave, that he would no longer be there to accompany her to appointments, to calm her fears, or simply to make her laugh, was more painful than she was willing to admit. One afternoon, while organizing the small baby clothes she had bought, Eleanor found a shirt that Daniel had folded and carefully placed in the wardrobe. His scent still clung to the fabric, and in that moment, the tears she had been holding back began to fall uncontrollably. She didn't understand why his departure hurt so much. Wasn't this what was best for him? For his part, Daniel was also struggling with the decision. Every time he saw Eleanor, his resolve faltered. He thought about how she had become an essential part of his life, how her smile and strength had inspired him in ways he had never imagined. But every time he saw Thomas, who seemed more determined to win Eleanor back, Daniel convinced himself that it was best to step back. One night, Daniel stopped by Eleanor's flat to deliver a book he had promised to lend her. When she opened the door, she greeted him with a tired smile. Her belly was already prominent, and Daniel couldn't help but be moved by how beautiful she looked. "How's everything going?" he asked, entering and looking around. "Fine," Eleanor replied, trying to sound casual. "Just organizing some things before the baby arrives." Daniel nodded, but there was something in his expression that made Eleanor know he wanted to say something more. Finally, he sighed and turned to her. "I start packing tomorrow," he said, as if those words carried the full weight of his decision. Eleanor felt a knot in her stomach. Although she knew this moment would come, hearing it aloud made it much more real. "When's your flight?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "In a week," Daniel replied, his eyes searching hers. Eleanor nodded slowly, unable to say more. The feeling of loss was overwhelming, but she couldn't let him see it. Daniel, perceiving her discomfort, took a step towards her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ellie, you're going to be okay. You're strong, much stronger than you think." The words were sincere, but they also hurt. Eleanor forced a smile and nodded. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." That night, when Daniel left, Eleanor was left alone in the flat, feeling a part of her world slowly crumble. She didn't understand why losing him hurt so much, but all she knew was that, in his absence, the void would be impossible to fill. In his flat, Daniel looked at his plane ticket on the table and wondered, for the first time, if he was really making the right decision. A bittersweet farewell looms. Will Eleanor let Daniel go, or will she fight for the love she never expected? What would you do if you had one last chance? Share your desperate hopes in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the thrilling climax. The faint morning light filtered through the flat's curtains, but Eleanor found no peace in the day that had barely begun. She had spent the night awake, turning over the same thoughts that had tormented her since Daniel told her about his departure. No matter how much she tried to convince herself that everything would be okay, something inside her kept screaming that losing him would be more devastating than she was willing to admit. With her belly already large and heavy, Eleanor lay back on the sofa, hugging a pillow as if that could calm the knot in her chest. Her mind, unable to stop, began to replay the moments she had shared with Daniel. The way he always appeared when she needed him, his warm laugh that filled the flat, even on the darkest days. The way he looked at her as if he could see directly into her soul. As her thoughts filled with memories, the phone rang. It was Thomas. Eleanor sighed before answering. The relationship with Thomas remained complicated, a mix of cordiality and distance that neither of them knew how to overcome. Although he tried hard to show his repentance and wanted to be part of the baby's life, Eleanor felt that something had broken irrevocably between them. "Hello, Thomas," she replied with a tired voice. "Eleanor, how are you feeling today? I was thinking of stopping by your place later. Maybe we could go for a walk, or grab something to eat," he suggested. His tone full of enthusiasm. Eleanor hesitated. She didn't want to be cruel, but she also couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine between them. "Thanks, but I think I'd prefer to stay home today. I don't feel like I have much energy," she replied, trying to sound kind. Thomas was silent for a moment before replying, his voice tinged with frustration. "I understand, but Eleanor, I need you to give me a chance. I know I made mistakes, but I want to fix things. For you, for our child." Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. "Thomas, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but things aren't that simple. I can't pretend that everything is as it was before, because it isn't." The conversation ended shortly after, leaving Eleanor even more lost in her thoughts. Why did she feel so distant from Thomas? Why was it that every time she thought about the future, the image that appeared in her mind was Daniel's, and not his? That afternoon, while trying to distract herself by organizing the small details of the baby's room, she received a text message from Daniel. "Ellie, I wanted to tell you my flight is tomorrow. If you need anything before I go, let me know, okay?" Eleanor's world seemed to stop as she read those words. She knew his departure was imminent, but seeing it written, so definitive, made the air in her lungs heavy. Daniel was leaving. Tomorrow. The rest of the day passed in a fog of emotions. Eleanor tried to concentrate on anything but her thoughts, but every time she tried, Daniel's image filled her mind. What would life be like without him? Who would be there to support her when things got complicated? Who would be her refuge when the world felt too big and terrifying? That night, Eleanor couldn't take it anymore. She sat on the bed and let the tears flow freely. She was tired of trying to hide what she felt, even from herself. Because, no matter how much she tried to deny it, the truth was clear. She couldn't imagine her life without Daniel. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit what she had been suppressing for months. What she felt for Daniel wasn't just gratitude or friendship. It was something deeper, more intense, something that terrified her and filled her with hope at the same time. The night crept by slowly, and with each passing hour, the fear of losing him grew. What if he left and never came back? What if she never had the chance to tell him what she truly felt? At dawn, Eleanor made a decision. She couldn't let Daniel leave without knowing how much he meant to her. She didn't know if he felt the same way, but that no longer mattered. All she knew was that she had to try. With her heart pounding, Eleanor picked up her phone and dialed his number. But just as she was about to press the call button, she stopped. What could she say? How could she find the words to express everything she felt without sounding desperate? She decided to wait. She wanted to see him in person, look into his eyes, and tell him the truth. She had to do it before it was too late. While Eleanor prepared to confront her feelings, Daniel, in his flat, contemplated his plane ticket and wondered, for the first time, if he was truly ready to leave her behind. The ultimate race against time. Will Eleanor reach Daniel before his flight departs? What do you think her heartfelt confession will be? Share your nail-biting predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the emotional climax. Eleanor closed her flat door firmly, her heart pounding with an urgency she had never felt before. The decision was made. She couldn't let Daniel leave without knowing what she felt for him. Her mind repeated the words she had practiced in the mirror that morning, but her hands trembled as she grabbed her keys and headed for the car. The clock struck 7 a.m., and the city was already awake, with traffic beginning to thicken. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel tightly, praying for every traffic light to turn green. Her breathing was rapid, and every time she looked at the clock on the dashboard, her anxiety grew. Daniel couldn't be on the plane yet. "Please, please, don't leave yet," she murmured to herself as she maneuvered through cars and buses. The airport was 40 minutes from her home, but at that moment, it seemed a whole world away. The air inside the car was heavy, as if reflecting the tension that filled every corner of her being. Her mind traveled to the first moment Daniel appeared in her life, the man who had comforted her on the most humiliating day of her existence. To all the times he had been there, asking for nothing in return, illuminating dark days with his calm, constant presence. Finally, the airport lights began to appear on the horizon. Eleanor felt a pang of relief mixed with panic. There was still time, but she didn't know how much. She parked hurriedly and got out of the car, not even remembering if she had put the handbrake on. The airport lobby was bustling with people, families saying goodbye, hurried travelers, curious tourists. Eleanor, with her prominent belly, tried to move as quickly as she could, gently pushing through the crowd. A tear slid down her cheek as she thought of the possibility of not arriving in time, of forever losing the chance to tell Daniel what she truly felt. Which terminal was it? Which airline? She thought frantically as she searched the departure screens. Her mind strained to recall the detail Daniel had casually mentioned days earlier, an international flight with a layover in Milan. There it was, Terminal 3, Gate 24. With renewed determination, Eleanor quickened her pace, ignoring the curious glances of those surprised to see a pregnant woman running through the airport. Each meter seemed like an eternity, and her breathing became increasingly erratic. When she finally reached Gate 24, she saw Daniel standing by the counter, handing his passport to the flight attendant. Her heart leaped. "Daniel!" she cried with all the strength she could muster, her voice echoing in the space. Daniel, with his backpack on his shoulder, slowly turned at the sound of his name. His surprised look quickly transformed into concern as he saw her panting and evidently emotional. He left his documents on the counter and took a few steps towards her. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice full of confusion and a hint of alarm. Eleanor raised a hand, trying to catch her breath. But before she could stop to think, the words began to flow. "You can't leave, Daniel. I can't let you go without knowing what I feel, without telling you how important you are to me. All this time I thought I could handle it, that I'd be fine if you left. But I was wrong. I'm not okay. I won't be okay without you." The words tumbled out, and Daniel's eyes filled with astonishment. Eleanor continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "I don't know when it happened, but I fell in love with you, Daniel. I fell in love with the way you're always there, how you make everything seem easier, even when my world crumbles. I love you, and I don't want you to leave." The silence that followed her confession was deafening. Daniel stood motionless, as if trying to process what he had just heard. His eyes met Eleanor's, and at that moment, Something inside him seemed to break. "Eleanor," he began, but his voice cut off. He took a step towards her, then another, until he was close enough for her to see the gleam in his eyes. "You have no idea how much I've longed to hear that," he finally said, his voice laden with emotion. The flight attendant, still holding Daniel's documents, called out, reminding him it was his turn to board. But Daniel didn't move. His gaze was fixed on Eleanor, as if the entire airport had disappeared and only the two of them existed. "So what are you going to do?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. "Are you going to get on that plane and leave me here?" Daniel let out a deep sigh, and at that moment, he let his backpack fall to the floor. Without saying a word, he wrapped Eleanor in an embrace, holding her tightly as if he never wanted to let her go. Daniel held her in his arms, as if the whole world depended on that moment. The airport's bustle disappeared, and in his mind, only the two of them existed. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, felt for the first time in months that everything made sense, that all the pieces finally fit. "I love you, Eleanor," Daniel whispered, his voice broken with emotion. "I've loved you since the day I saw you at that altar, even when I didn't know what you were feeling. But I never thought I could be part of your life, not in the way I truly desired." Eleanor looked at him, incredulous and moved. His words were everything she had dreamed of hearing, but she had never dared to imagine they were real. "Daniel, you're already part of my life. You always have been. I never knew how to say it, but what I feel for you is everything. It's love, it's gratitude, it's need. It's you, it's always been you." Daniel let out a shaky laugh, a mix of relief and happiness he couldn't contain. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that," he said, gently caressing Eleanor's face. A boarding announcement echoed over the airport loudspeakers, reminding him that his flight was about to depart. Daniel looked towards the counter where his passport and ticket still waited, and then returned his attention to Eleanor. "I can't leave. I don't want to leave. Everything I need is here, with you and with our baby." Eleanor let out a sigh of relief that seemed to release months of tension. "I don't want you to go, Daniel. I want you to be with me, for us to be together, the three of us." Daniel nodded, as if that decision had already been made the moment he saw her run into the airport. "Then I'm staying, with you, forever." The two embraced once more, ignoring the curious glances of passers-by. In that instant, everything else ceased to matter. What an incredible, movie-worthy confession. This is the kind of love story we live for. Share your absolute favorite moment in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the heartwarming epilogue. The Unseen Hand, A Love Forged in Heartbreak, Part 8, the epilogue. The following months were a whirlwind of preparations for the baby's arrival and for building the life they had both decided to share. Daniel moved into Eleanor's flat, and together they transformed the space into a home filled with warmth and love. Every corner of the place reflected the new stage they were beginning, from the soft colors of the baby's room to the small details Daniel added to make her smile. The day the baby was born was a day full of emotions. Daniel was by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. When they finally heard the baby's first cry, tears filled both their eyes. It was a boy, perfect in every way. "Welcome to the world, little one," Daniel said, holding the baby for the first time. He looked at Eleanor with a smile that was pure love. "He's beautiful, like his mom." Eleanor, exhausted but radiant, looked at him with gratitude. "And he has his daddy's strength." Weeks later, in a park near the flat, Eleanor and Daniel strolled with the baby in their arms. The sun shone softly, and a light breeze caressed their faces. The laughter and murmurs of other parents with their children filled the air, but for them, the world was summed up in that perfect moment. Do you know what name I think suits him perfectly? Eleanor asked, looking at the sleeping baby. Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Which one? Leo, she said with a smile. Strong, but full of love. Like you? Daniel looked at her tenderly, leaning in to kiss her forehead. Leo is perfect. In the distance behind a tree, a figure watched in silence. Thomas was there, watching Eleanor and Daniel with the baby. His heart ached as he saw the happiness on the face of the woman he had once loved and had lost due to his own mistakes. He wanted to approach, but something stopped him. He knew he no longer had a place in that new life she had built. With a resigned sigh, Thomas turned and walked away, carrying with him the weight of what he could never recover. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Daniel continued walking, oblivious to Thomas's gaze. Their hands intertwined, and they both looked at little Leo, knowing that their story had just begun. Every step they took together was a promise of a future full of love, hope, and the certainty that they had found in each other something they could never have imagined. 5 years later, Eleanor and Daniel's home was full of life. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the halls, mixing with the melody of a song Daniel softly played on his old guitar. Little Leo, now a curious and energetic child, ran around the garden, chasing a puppy that had recently become part of the family. Eleanor, with a serene smile, watched the scene from the porch, her heart filled with gratitude. Life had taken unexpected turns, but every step had led her to this place, a warm home, full of love, where every day was a new opportunity to celebrate the family they had built together. Inside the house, Daniel appeared at the door, carrying a curly-haired girl, barely a year old, in his arms. The little one, with brown eyes identical to her father's, babbled happily as she played with a lock of Daniel's hair. "Leo's trying to teach the puppy to jump a fence," Daniel commented with a laugh as he sat next to Eleanor. "I think he's more enthusiastic than the dog." Eleanor laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "He has your energy and my stubbornness. We're in trouble." Daniel looked at her tenderly and kissed her forehead. "And he also has our love, Ellie. That's all that matters." The days were no longer marked by doubts or fears, but by small moments of shared happiness. Eleanor and Daniel had found in their union not only a deep love, but also the strength to face any challenge. The birth of their second child, Isabella, had added a new spark to their lives. Leo had embraced his role as big brother with enthusiasm, always looking after his little sister with a dedication that made Eleanor and Daniel look at him with pride. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Eleanor took Daniel's hand, and together they walked into the garden. They stopped beside Leo, who was now sitting on the grass with Isabella on his lap, trying to show her how to throw a ball to the puppy. "We're lucky," Eleanor said softly, looking at her children with eyes full of tears. "We are," Daniel replied, squeezing her hand. "And it all started with you, Ellie, for having the courage to run to me that day." Eleanor looked at him with a smile full of love. "And why did you decide to stay?" At that moment, words weren't needed. Their gazes said it all. Gratitude, love, and the certainty that together they could overcome anything. Night fell gently, and as the stars began to shine in the sky, Eleanor and Daniel sat with their children on a blanket spread over the grass, telling stories and dreaming of the future. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been generous in teaching them both that true love was one that grew in the darkest moments and blossomed under the light of hope. And so, under the starry sky, Eleanor, Daniel, Leo, and Isabella were the perfect portrait of a united family, living each day with the certainty that they had found their happiness. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave your comment and hit like. I love reading your opinions. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story, full of emotion and love.